The ex-husband took his mistress to dinner in the restaurant and saw his ex-black wife proposed by a rich man. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. Merry Christmas, dear friend. Your presence makes this season of love and magic even more special. Before we begin, tell us, what's your name? Are you a long-time friend or visiting us for the first time? No matter where you come from, your family here. Thank you for sharing this moment with us. Now, let's dive into a heartwarming tale filled with joy, wonder, and unforgettable memories. Let's make this Christmas magical. Together. The pristine halls of New York Presbyterian Hospital echoed with the rhythmic click of autumn-winter's Louboutin heels as she strode purposefully toward the neurosurgery wing. At 34, she commanded attention not through deliberate effort, but through the natural gravitas that came from saving lives on a daily basis. Her elegant fingers, capable of the most delicate brain surgeries, clutched the latest patient files as she navigated the familiar corridors with practiced ease. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow on her deep umber skin and highlighting the subtle undertones of her precisely styled dreadlocks. Each one crafted to meet the exacting standards of both the operating room and New York's high society. She had fought hard to maintain this aspect of her identity in a profession that often demanded conformity, and now it was as much her signature as her surgical precision. Today marked her 10th successful surgery this month, a record even for her department. The removal of a grade 4 glioblastoma from a 12-year-old's brainstem had been declared impossible by 3 other surgeons, but Autumn had spent weeks developing a groundbreaking approach that would later be published in leading medical journals. The girl would live, and that knowledge brought a quiet smile to Autumn's full lips as she reached her office. The space was a testament to her achievements. Walls adorned with degrees from Harvard Medical School, fellowships from Johns Hopkins, and numerous awards recognizing her innovations in pediatric neurosurgery. But it was the children's drawings, gifts from grateful patients, that truly brought warmth to the otherwise clinical environment. Their bright colors and hopeful messages reminded her daily of why she had chosen this demanding path. Her phone buzzed with a message from her husband, Jace Sterling. Dinner tonight at Le Bernardin, 8 p.m., celebrating the Morrison deal. Short, precise, like most of their communications lately. Autumn sighed, her perfectly manicured fingers hovering over the screen before typing a quick confirmation. She couldn't remember the last time he had asked rather than informed, the last time he had called instead of texted, or the last time his message had contained any real warmth. Jace Sterling, with his steel-grey eyes and carefully cultivated salt-and-pepper hair, had once been her escape from the intensity of medical life. His world of high finance and hedge fund management had seemed exciting, different, a contrast to the life and death decisions that filled her days. Now, 7 years into their marriage, she wondered if they had become too different, operating in parallel universes that intersected only at charity galas and society functions. Through the glass walls of her office, Autumn watched her team preparing for rounds. Dr. Harrison, her protégé, caught her eye and gestured to his watch, a reminder of the morning's schedule. She nodded, gathering her thoughts and the necessary files. This was her element, where everything made sense, where her decisions had clear purposes and measurable outcomes. The morning sun caught the massive diamond on her left hand, sending prismatic reflections dancing across her desk. The ring, like everything about their marriage, was carefully chosen to project an image of success and perfection. Jace had selected it with the same analytical precision he applied to his investment portfolios: flawless clarity, optimal cut, impressive carat weight. Sometimes she wondered if he had chosen her the same way, a perfect addition to his carefully curated life. Their penthouse on the Upper East Side told a similar story. The interior designer had crafted each room to be magazine-worthy, incorporating elements of both their tastes into a space that looked lived in but never truly felt like home. African art pieces she had collected during medical missions abroad sat alongside modern sculptures Jace had acquired at exclusive galleries. The wall-to-wall windows offered breathtaking views of Central Park, but lately Autumn found herself looking past the manicured greenery to the bustling streets below, wondering about the real stories playing out in the lives of ordinary New Yorkers. As she prepared for rounds, Autumn's mind drifted to the upcoming evening. Le Bernardin was Jace's way of showing appreciation, but even his gestures of romance had become predictable, programmed like the algorithmic trades that had built his fortune. She knew the script. He would order the wine pairing, discuss his latest deal's success, maybe mention the upcoming benefit gala they needed to attend. There would be other diners stealing glances at them, the power couple, the successful black female neurosurgeon, and her finance mogul husband, living proof of the American dream. But dreams, Autumn was learning, had a way of shifting, evolving, sometimes disappearing altogether. The young girl who had grown up in a modest Baltimore row house, who had studied by streetlight when the electricity was cut off, who had earned scholarships through sheer determination, that girl had dreamed of helping people, of making a difference. Somewhere along the way, that dream had become entangled with society's expectations, with Jace's ambitions, with the endless pursuit of perfection. The intercom buzzed, "Doctor," Harrison's voice breaking through her reverie. "Dr. Winters, we're ready for rounds." Autumn straightened her white coat, checking her reflection in the window. The woman who looked back at her was everything she had aspired to be professionally, but personally. That answer grew more uncertain with each passing day. She gathered her tablet and patient files, squaring her shoulders as she prepared to face another day of brain surgeries and board meetings. The halls of New York Presbyterian welcomed her back into their embrace, where she was simply Dr. Winters, where her identity was clear and her purpose unchanged. Here, at least, the illusion of perfection aligned with reality. As she stepped out of her office, Autumn couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, like the first tremors before an earthquake. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Jace, this time about coordinating their appearances at an upcoming charity event. She slipped the phone into her pocket unanswered. Right now, she had lives to save, residents to teach, and a reputation to uphold. The rest, her marriage, her personal life, the growing distance between who she was and who she was expected to be, would have to wait. Little did she know, across town, in the gleaming offices of Sterling Capital Management, Jace was making decisions that would shatter their carefully constructed world. As she focused on saving lives, he was about to prove that the biggest threats to happiness often came not from external forces, but from those closest to us, those we trusted to guard our hearts. The morning continued with its familiar rhythm. Rounds, consultations, meetings with residents. Autumn moved through it all with practiced grace, her mind occasionally drifting to the evening ahead. She didn't yet know that tonight's dinner would be more than just another social obligation. It would be the beginning of the end, the first crack in the perfect illusion they had crafted so carefully. The future was rushing toward them like a freight train, and neither Autumn nor Jace could see it coming. But perhaps that was the nature of perfect illusions. They remained flawless until the very moment they shattered, leaving behind something real, raw, and ultimately more valuable than any carefully constructed facade could ever be. As the morning sun climbed higher over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the hospital corridors, Autumn continued her rounds, unaware that by sunset the foundations of her world would begin to shift. Her patients needed her steady hands and clear mind, and for now, that was enough. The rest would reveal itself in due time, bringing with it changes that would transform not just her marriage, but her entire understanding of love, betrayal, and the true meaning of success. The perfect illusion was about to crack, and through those fissures, a stronger, more authentic version of Autumn Winters would emerge. But for now, she walked the hospital halls, healing others, while unaware that soon she would need to heal herself. Chapter 2. Hidden Fractures. The 45th floor of Manhattan's gleaming Sterling Tower housed the kind of silence that came with old money and even older power. Jace Sterling sat in his corner office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a god's-eye view of the city he had helped shape through countless mergers, acquisitions, and strategic investments. His Brioni suit, perfectly tailored to his athletic frame, was as much armor as it was clothing, a shield against the increasing emptiness that plagued his seemingly perfect life. The morning sun caught the sharp angles of his face as he studied the latest cryptocurrency market projections on his dual monitors. His steel-grey eyes, once praised by Autumn for their warmth, had grown harder over the years, matching the chrome and glass environment he had built around himself. At 41, Jace Sterling was at the peak of his professional success and the nadir of his personal fulfillment. A soft knock on his door broke his concentration. Scarlet Rivers stood in the doorway, a vision in a crimson pencil dress that matched her namesake, her platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. As his firm's lead cryptocurrency analyst, she had every right to be there, presenting the latest market trends. But they both knew these morning meetings had evolved into something far more dangerous than professional consultation. "The Asian markets are showing interesting patterns," Scarlett began, her voice carrying the slight lilt of her Australian upbringing. She moved with calculated grace as she approached his desk, each step a carefully choreographed dance they had been performing for the past 3 months. "I thought you'd want to see the analysis before the morning meeting." Jace gestured to the chair across from him, noticing how the sunlight caught the green flecks in her hazel eyes. At 32, Scarlett represented everything his life with Autumn had ceased to be: spontaneous, exciting, uncomplicated. No emergency surgeries, no charity galas, no expectations of maintaining the perfect power couple image that New York society had thrust upon them. "Show me," he said, his voice carrying the authority that had made him legendary on Wall Street. Scarlett pulled up her presentation, but instead of focusing on the charts and projections, Jace found himself studying the curve of her neck, the way her fingers danced across the keyboard with a precision that reminded him of Autumn's surgical techniques. A comparison that sent a jolt of guilt through his chest. Their affair had begun innocently enough, if affairs could ever be truly innocent. Late nights poring over market data had turned into casual dinners discussing strategy. Professional admiration had morphed into personal attraction, and attraction had blazed into something that threatened to consume everything in its path. The first kiss had happened right here in this office, after a particularly successful cryptocurrency trade had doubled their initial investment. "The Japanese market is showing signs of volatility," Scarlett continued, but her voice had dropped to a more intimate tone. "We should monitor it closely over the next 24 hours. The subtext was clear. Another late night at the office, another opportunity to blur the lines between professional and personal. Jace's phone buzzed with a message from Autumn, a reminder about their dinner reservation at Le Bernardin. The sight of her name sent another wave of guilt crashing through him. He thought of their morning interaction, if it could even be called that, how she had barely looked up from her medical journals as he left for work. When had they stopped really seeing each other? "Jace." Scarlett's voice pulled him back to the present. She had moved closer, her perfume, something exotic and unfamiliar, filling the space between them. "Are you listening?" He nodded, though they both knew his mind was elsewhere. The weight of his wedding ring seemed to increase with each passing day, a golden shackle that reminded him of promises made when he had been a different man, wanting different things. Now, at 41, he found himself trapped between the life he had built and the escape he craved. Their secret meetings had become more frequent, more reckless. The boutique hotel 3 blocks away knew them by different names, the thrill of deception adding a sharp edge to their encounters. Scarlett never asked about Autumn, never demanded promises or commitments. She took what he offered and seemed content with their stolen moments, their shared secrets. But lately, something had shifted. Jace caught himself comparing them more often. Autumn's focused intensity versus Scarlett's carefree spirit. Autumn's deep complexity versus Scarlett's refreshing simplicity. It wasn't fair to either woman, he knew, but the mind had a way of creating parallels, seeking justification for its betrayals. "There's a new rooftop bar in Tribeca," Scarlett mentioned casually, smoothing her dress as she stood. "The view is supposed to be spectacular at sunset." Another invitation, another chance to step further away from the life he had built with Autumn. Jace glanced at his phone again, at the reminder about Le Bernardin. He should say no. He should focus on his marriage, on reconnecting with the woman who had stood by him as he built his empire. Instead, he heard himself say, "Text me the details." As Scarlett left his office, her heels clicking against the marble floor, Jace turned to the window. The city sprawled before him, a maze of possibilities and consequences. Somewhere in that concrete jungle, Autumn was probably in surgery, her skilled hands deep in someone's brain, saving another life. He wondered if she suspected, if her brilliant mind had picked up on the subtle changes in his behavior, the late nights, the distant responses. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Jace moved through them mechanically, his mind divided between guilt and anticipation. The sterling reputation he had built, the respect he commanded in financial circles, all of it felt hollow compared to the electric thrill of his secret rendezvous with Scarlett. During lunch, he found himself in the elevator with her, descending to the building's exclusive restaurant. They maintained a professional distance, but the air between them crackled with unspoken promises. Other employees chatted about market trends and weekend plans, oblivious to the tempest brewing in their midst. "The Morrison deal is closing today," Scarlett mentioned, her voice carrying just the right amount of professional interest. "That calls for a celebration, don't you think? The Morrison deal, his excuse for dinner with Autumn." The irony wasn't lost on him. One celebration with his wife, another with his mistress. His life had become a carefully orchestrated performance, each act requiring different masks, different versions of himself. Back in his office, Jace stared at the family photo on his desk. Him and Autumn at last year's charity gala, both smiling perfect smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. When had they become such strangers? When had the passion that once fueled their relationship cooled into this polite distance? His secretary buzzed in, reminding him of the afternoon's board meeting. More masks to wear, more roles to play. As he gathered his materials, his phone lit up with another message from Scarlett. "Sunset is at 7:30. Don't be late." The facade was cracking, hairline fractures spreading through the perfect image he had crafted. Soon everything would shatter, his marriage, his reputation, perhaps even his carefully built empire. But as he straightened his tie and headed to the board meeting, Jace Sterling couldn't bring himself to care. The thrill of the fall had become more appealing than the burden of maintaining appearances. Little did he know that fate had its own plans for that evening. As he orchestrated his elaborate deception, forces beyond his control were aligning to bring everything crashing down. The perfect illusion he had built was about to meet reality. and reality had a way of being merciless to those who tried to bend it to their will. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his office, like fingers pointing accusingly at his betrayal. But Jace had moved beyond guilt now, into a space where the only thing that mattered was the next moment, the next thrill, the next escape from the golden cage he had built around himself. As he prepared for the evening ahead, juggling dinner plans with Autumn and his rendezvous with Scarlet, Jace Sterling remained unaware that his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. The hidden fractures in his life were about to break open, exposing everything he had tried so hard to conceal. The city continued its endless rhythm below, indifferent to the drama unfolding in its towers of glass and steel. Soon, very soon, all the carefully laid plans and secret meetings would explode into a scandal that would rock their privileged world to its core. But for now, Jace straightened his tie one last time, checked his messages, and stepped into the elevator, ready to play his part in the unfolding tragedy. Chapter 3. The fateful evening. Le Cirque's elegant interior glowed with the warm amber light of crystal chandeliers, each facet reflecting the drama about to unfold on this autumn evening. The restaurant had long been a sanctuary for Manhattan's elite, its curved walls witnessing countless deals, proposals, and tonight, an exquisite collision of fate that would shatter the foundations of two relationships. Jace Sterling guided Scarlet through the restaurant's ornate entrance, his hand hovering near the small of her back, but not quite touching, a dance of discretion they had perfected over months of secret meetings. He had chosen Le Cirque deliberately, a subconscious act of rebellion against his marriage. This had been his and Autumn's special place, where he had proposed 7 years ago, where they had celebrated countless anniversaries and achievements. Scarlet was a vision in midnight blue, her dress a masterpiece of understated elegance that still managed to turn heads as they followed the maître d' to their table. Her platinum hair caught the light, creating a halo effect that made her look almost ethereal. She moved with the confident grace of someone accustomed to being desired, each step precise in her Manolo Blahniks. "Your usual table, Mr. Sterling?" the maître d' asked, already leading them toward the intimate corner booth where he had dined with Autumn so many times before. "No," Jace replied quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Something different tonight." He didn't want to examine why he couldn't bear to sit in that booth with Scarlet, didn't want to acknowledge the guilt that still lingered beneath his carefully maintained facade of indifference. They were seated at a table with a view of Central Park, the city lights twinkling beyond the restaurant's windows like distant stars. Jace ordered a bottle of Chateau Margaux, 2015, different from the Burgundies he usually shared with Autumn. Everything about tonight needed to be different, needed to establish this as something separate from his married life. "You're distracted," Scarlet observed, her Australian accent more pronounced in intimate settings. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand with practiced casualness. "The Morrison deal?" Jace forced a smile, adjusting his Patek Philippe watch, a 5th anniversary gift from Autumn. "Just thinking about the market implications." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But their relationship thrived on such polite fictions. He was thinking about the text he had sent Autumn earlier, cancelling their dinner plans with a vague excuse about a late meeting. Across the restaurant, hidden from their view by an artistic arrangement of privacy screens and floating orchids, Autumn Winters was celebrating her own moment of liberation. She sat at a round table with her closest friends, Dr. Rosalie Chen, her fellow neurosurgeon, Zara Thompson, her college roommate turned civil rights attorney, and Madison Hayes, the gallery owner who had helped furnish their penthouse with its impressive art collection. Autumn looked radiant in a cream-colored Valentino dress that complemented her dark skin perfectly, her dreadlocks styled in an elegant updo that spoke of both sophistication and cultural pride. The diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, a gift from Jace, caught the light as she raised her champagne glass. "To freedom," Zara proposed, her dark eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "And to having the courage to choose happiness over appearances." The women clinked glasses, celebrating the papers Autumn had filed that morning. Divorce papers that would end her 7-year marriage to one of Wall Street's most powerful men. She hadn't told Jace yet. Tonight was about celebrating with the women who had supported her through months of suspicion, weeks of evidence gathering, and finally the decision to end a marriage that had become more prison than partnership. "Dr. Winters," a deep voice interrupted their toast. Kingston Alexander Rhodes stood before their table, his 6'3" frame impeccably dressed in a custom Tom Ford suit that highlighted his broad shoulders and athletic build. At 43, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built a tech empire from the ground up. "Kingston," Autumn smiled, genuine warmth replacing the polite mask she had worn so often lately. They had met 6 months ago at a hospital board meeting where his company was presenting revolutionary AI technology for diagnostic imaging. Their subsequent conversations had awakened something in her that she had thought long dead. Intellectual excitement, genuine connection, the thrill of being truly seen. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, though the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth suggested he had planned this interruption carefully. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Not at all," Madison replied before Autumn could speak, sharing knowing looks with Rosalie and Zara. They had watched the subtle dance between Autumn and Kingston over the past months, seen how he treated her with a respect that went beyond mere professional courtesy. Kingston pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box that caused all conversation at the table to cease. "I know this might seem sudden to others," he began, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that had made him a legend in Silicon Valley. "But sometimes when you know, you know." Autumn's heart began to race as Kingston went down on one knee beside her chair. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath, the usual buzz of conversation dimming to a hushed anticipation. "Autumn Winters," he continued, "you are the most brilliant, compassionate, and authentic person I have ever met. You challenge me intellectually, inspire me professionally, and move me emotionally. I know you're going through a transition in your life, but I want you to know that I'm ready to wait as long as you need. When you're ready, if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you." He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald-cut diamond ring, but it was the smaller box beside it that brought tears to Autumn's eyes. Inside was a simple silver key card, access to his private research lab where they had spent countless hours discussing the future of medical technology. "The ring is negotiable," Kingston said with a smile that transformed his usually serious features. "But I'm hoping you'll accept both. Marry me, partner with me in revolutionizing medical care for underserved communities, build a future with me that's based on genuine connection rather than social expectations." The sound of shattering glass cut through the moment like a knife. Across the restaurant, Jace Sterling stood frozen, the remains of his wine glass scattered at his feet like rubies on the plush carpet. His face had drained of color as he stared at the scene unfolding across the room. His wife, his Autumn, being proposed to by one of the most powerful men in tech. Scarlett followed his gaze, her own glass suspended halfway to her lips. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Why he had been increasingly distracted, why he had insisted on a different table, why his guilt had seemed to weigh heavier lately. The restaurant held its breath, caught in the gravity of this moment where private betrayals became public theatre. Autumn's eyes met Jace's across the space that separated them, not just physical distance, but the vast emotional chasm that had grown between them over years of neglect and betrayal. In that moment, time seemed to crystallize. Jace saw not pain or anger in Autumn's eyes, but something far worse, complete indifference. She turned back to Kingston, who was still on one knee, waiting with the patient confidence of a man who understood the value of what he was asking for. "Yes," Autumn said, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the hushed restaurant. "To both proposals." She allowed Kingston to slip the ring onto her finger, accepted the keycard with equal reverence, and rose to embrace him as the restaurant erupted in applause. Her friends were on their feet, champagne flowing freely now as other diners offered their congratulations. Kingston pulled her close, his kiss both tender and respectful, a public declaration of private feelings that had been building for months. At their table, Scarlett watched Jace's face crumple with the realization that he had not only lost his wife, but had underestimated her completely. She saw the moment he understood that Autumn had known about their affair, had planned her escape with the same precision she brought to her surgeries, and had emerged not as a victim, but as a victor. "Jace," Scarlett began, but he was already moving, stumbling toward the exit, leaving her alone at the table with an unopened bottle of wine and the weight of unspoken revelations. She signaled for the check, dignity warring with humiliation as she felt the curious eyes of other diners. The evening air hit Jace like a physical blow as he burst onto the sidewalk. Behind him, through Le Cirque's windows, he could see Autumn accepting congratulations, her smile radiant as Kingston kept her close. The sight of them together, so clearly matched in intelligence, ambition and mutual respect, forced him to confront every mistake, every casual betrayal that had led to this moment. Inside, Autumn caught a glimpse of his retreat through the window. A small part of her had imagined this moment differently, had pictured tears or confrontation, drama or denial. Instead, she felt only a profound sense of rightness as Kingston's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with natural ease. "To new beginnings," Rosalie proposed, raising her glass once more. The toast was echoed around the table, but Autumn's eyes were on the keycard Kingston had given her. It represented everything her marriage to Jace had lacked: partnership, respect, shared purpose. The night continued, a celebration of endings and beginnings, while outside, Jace Sterling's world crumbled with the weight of consequences long overdue. The perfect illusion had shattered, leaving behind the glittering shards of what once was and the bright promise of what could be. Le Cirque's elegant rooms had witnessed countless stories over the years, but few as poetically just as this evening's drama. As the night drew to a close, 3 lives had been irrevocably changed, one rising from the ashes of betrayal, one falling from the heights of presumption, and one caught in the crossfire of their unraveling. Chapter 4. Shattered Glass. The New York night wrapped itself around Jace Sterling like a shroud as he stumbled out of Le Cirque, the crisp autumn air doing nothing to clear the fog of devastation clouding his mind. The doorman's concerned look barely registered as he waved off the offer to call his car service. He needed to walk, needed to move, needed to do something to process the scene that had just shattered his carefully constructed world. Fifth Avenue stretched before him like a river of lights, the city's endless energy a stark contrast to the hollow emptiness expanding in his chest. His Italian leather shoes, worth more than some people's monthly rent, scraped against the concrete as he walked aimlessly, his usual confident stride replaced by the uncertain gait of a man whose foundations had crumbled. Behind him, through Le Cirque's elegant windows, the celebration continued. Autumn's joy radiated through the glass, a beacon of happiness that now seemed designed specifically to torture him. The image of Kingston Alexander Rhodes on one knee burned in his mind, competing with the memory of Autumn's face. Not broken, not devastated, but triumphant. She had known. Somehow, his brilliant, beautiful wife had known everything and had orchestrated her revenge with surgical precision. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, Scarlet, no doubt, demanding explanations he couldn't give. The weight of his wedding ring seemed to increase with each step, a golden anchor dragging him down into the depths of his own making. He found himself in front of a bar he'd never noticed before, its neon sign casting a sickly blue glow across his expensive suit. Inside, the bartender took one look at him and placed a double scotch in front of him without being asked. "Rough night?" she asked, though her tone suggested she'd seen enough Wall Street types drowning their sorrows to know better than to expect an answer. Jace loosened his Hermes tie, the silk suddenly feeling like a noose. "My wife," he started, then stopped, laughing bitterly. "My wife just got engaged." The words hung in the air, their absurdity matching the surreal quality of the evening. Meanwhile, back at Le Cirque, Autumn sat in a cocoon of warmth created by friendship and vindication. Kingston's arm rested casually across the back of her chair, his presence solid and reassuring in a way Jace's had never been. The diamond on her finger caught the light differently than her wedding ring had, less like a brand of ownership and more like a promise of partnership. "When did you know?" Madison asked, leaning forward with the kind of intense curiosity that had made her one of New York's most successful gallery owners. "About Jace and that woman." Autumn's fingers traced the stem of her champagne glass, her surgical precision evident even in this small gesture. 3 months ago, she replied, her voice steady. The hospital's new AI diagnostic system, Kingston's system, flagged an anomaly in a routine scan. I was reviewing the code with him when a notification from Jace's credit card company popped up on my phone. Charges from hotels I'd never stayed in, restaurants we'd never visited together. Kingston's hand found hers under the table, a subtle gesture of support. "She turned that pain into purpose," he said, his deep voice carrying pride. "Revolutionized the AI's pattern recognition algorithms while she was at it." Zara raised her glass in a toast. "To karma, and to women who don't just get mad, but get even while advancing medical science." Across town, in her pristine Upper East Side apartment, Scarlet Rivers stood before her floor-to-ceiling windows, still wearing the midnight blue dress that had been chosen to entice. Her phone displayed a dozen unanswered messages to Jace, each one more desperate than the last. The sight of Autumn's triumph had awoken something uncomfortable in her chest. Not jealousy, exactly, but a creeping realization that she had been playing a game whose rules she hadn't fully understood. She poured herself a glass of wine, the same vintage Jace had ordered at dinner, and forced herself to confront uncomfortable truths. She had thought herself the victor in their little triangle, the younger woman who had captured the attention of one of Wall Street's most powerful men. Now, watching her carefully laid plans dissolve, she realized she had been a pawn in a much larger game. Back at the bar, Jace was on his third scotch when his phone buzzed again. Not Scarlet this time, but his firm's PR team. Someone at Le Cirque had already leaked the story to Page 6. By morning, every financial news outlet in the city would be running with it. Wall Street titan's wife trades up. Tech billionaire's proposal reveals Sterling's sterling achievement in failure. He could see the headlines now, could imagine the whispers in boardrooms and country clubs. The sterling reputation he had built was about to tarnish, and quickly. The Morrison deal would probably fall through. No one wanted to trust their millions to a man whose personal life was imploding so spectacularly. The bartender slid another scotch across the bar without being asked. "Want to know what I think?" she offered, her Brooklyn accent thick with seen-it-all wisdom. "You're not drinking because your wife's getting married. You're drinking because she beat you at your own game." The truth of those words hit harder than the scotch. Jace had spent his career orchestrating hostile takeovers, practicing the art of calculating exactly when a target was most vulnerable. Now, Autumn had done the same to him, timing her move perfectly to maximize impact and minimize his ability to respond. At Le Cercle, the celebration was winding down. Kingston helped Autumn into her coat, his touch reverent but confident. They had waited months for this moment, building a foundation of trust and mutual respect, while Autumn's marriage crumbled in silent, slow motion. "Stay at my place tonight," he offered as they stepped into the cool evening air. "The penthouse has a perfect view of sunrise over the park, and we have that early meeting with the hospital board about expanding the AI program." Autumn considered the offer, thinking of her own penthouse with its carefully curated art collection and memories of a marriage built on appearances. "I have a better idea," she said, pulling out her phone. "Let's go to the lab. I want to run some tests on those pattern recognition algorithms we discussed." Kingston's laugh was warm and genuine. "Only you would want to celebrate your engagement by revolutionizing medical technology." His hand found the small of her back as they walked toward his waiting car, the gesture natural and unposed, unlike Jace's calculated public displays of affection. In the bar, Jace's phone buzzed one final time, an email from his lawyer. Autumn's divorce filing had been processed that morning. The timestamp showed she had filed the papers hours before Kingston's proposal, a detail that would torment him in the weeks to come. She hadn't been running to another man. She had already decided to leave, and Kingston's proposal was simply the beginning of her next chapter, not the reason for ending the current one. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had underestimated her completely, had dismissed her quiet strength as passivity, had mistaken her focus on her career as disinterest in his. While he had been playing at secret rendezvous with Scarlett, Autumn had been building something real with a man who could match her intellect and ambition. Back at Le Cercle, the staff began clearing the celebration's remains. The maître d' carefully wrapped the champagne bottles for preservation. These would join the restaurant's collection of memorabilia, physical remnants of the nights when New York's social landscape shifted. One busboy discovered a broken heel from Scarlett's hasty exit, another found Jace's discarded wine glass, its stem cracked, but the bowl surprisingly intact. The night air carried the first hint of winter as Autumn and Kingston entered his state-of-the-art research facility. The security system recognized them immediately, responding to both his keycard and the new one he had given her. Inside, screens came to life, displaying the medical imaging projects they had been working on together. "You know," Kingston said, watching her move confidently through the space that would soon be as much hers as his, "most women would want to celebrate their engagement with champagne and roses, not medical algorithms and brain scans." Autumn's smile was radiant as she pulled up the code she had been working on. "That's exactly why this works," she replied. "You understand that this, all of this, is what makes me happy, not the society appearances or the charity galas, but the chance to make a real difference." The screens cast a blue glow across their faces as they lost themselves in the work that had brought them together. Outside, New York continued its endless dance of lights and shadows, unaware that within its heartbeat, lives had been forever altered. In his lonely bar seat, Jace Sterling ordered another scotch, each sip burning with the bitter taste of consequences. The bartender's words echoed in his mind. She had beaten him at his own game. But it was more than that. Autumn hadn't just outmaneuvered him. She had transcended the game entirely, building something authentic while he remained trapped in a world of appearances and calculated moves. The night stretched on, each minute carrying them all further from the people they had been when the evening began. In her empty apartment, Scarlett finally stopped checking her phone. In the research lab, Autumn and Kingston lost themselves in the work that had brought them together. And in a bar he would never visit again, Jace Sterling confronted the cost of mistaking possession for love, control for connection, and appearance for substance. The shattered glass of his wine stem at Le Cercle had been just the beginning. With each passing hour, the careful facade of his life continued to crack, revealing the hollow space where substance should have been. Morning would bring new challenges, press statements, damage control, the Morrison deal's inevitable collapse. But for now, he sat alone, a king toppled by his own hubris, while across the city, his queen had claimed a new kingdom, entirely her own. Chapter 5. The Rise. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Kingston's research facility, casting long shadows across the state-of-the-art medical imaging equipment. Autumn had barely noticed the hours passing, her fingers dancing across holographic displays as she refined algorithms that would revolutionize early cancer detection. She had changed from her evening wear into the spare set of scrubs she kept at the lab, her elegant updo now a practical bun, yet Kingston thought she had never looked more beautiful. Kingston Alexander Rhodes stood in the doorway of the main lab, 2 cups of artisanal coffee in hand, watching the woman who would soon be his wife lose herself in the work they both loved. Unlike Jace, who had seen Autumn's dedication to medicine as competition for her attention, Kingston found her passion intoxicating. He understood the drive to change the world, to leave a legacy bigger than wealth or social status. The new neural network is showing promising results, Autumn said without looking up, somehow sensing his presence. A smile played at the corners of her lips as she continued to work, her fingers moving with the same precision she brought to her surgeries. The pattern recognition rate has improved by 37%. Kingston set her coffee beside her workstation, his own forgotten, as he leaned in to study the data scrolling across the screen. "You've modified the base algorithm," he observed, his deep voice carrying notes of admiration and excitement. "This could cut diagnostic time in half." "More than that," Autumn replied, finally turning to face him. Their eyes met, and the spark between them had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with shared purpose. "With these modifications, we could make this technology accessible to hospitals in underserved communities. No more misdiagnoses due to overworked radiologists or outdated equipment." Kingston's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. The diamond ring on her finger caught the morning light, but it was the key card beside her workstation that held more meaning for both of them. "You haven't slept," he noted, concern mixing with understanding in his voice. "Neither have you," she countered, noticing the subtle signs of fatigue around his eyes. "But this is more important than sleep. Do you know how many lives we could save with this?" Instead of arguing or suggesting she rest, Kingston pulled up a chair beside her. "Show me," he said simply, and together they dove back into the work, their coffees growing cold forgotten. Across town, in his penthouse office at Sterling Tower, Jace Sterling faced a different kind of morning. The news of last night's events at Le Cirque had spread through New York's financial circles like wildfire. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn, calls from board members, investors, and most worryingly, the partners in the Morrison deal. The New York Times business section lay open on his desk, the headline stark against the crisp paper, "Tech meets medicine, Rhodes and Winters unite in both love and innovation." The article detailed not just the engagement, but the groundbreaking medical AI project they had been developing together. What should have been simply a society page scandal had become a business story about innovation and the future of healthcare. His secretary buzzed in, her voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Sterling, the Morrison Group is requesting an emergency meeting. They're concerned about recent developments." Jace closed his eyes, his head pounding from both hangover and stress. "Schedule it for this afternoon," he managed, his usual commanding tone wavering slightly. "And get me whatever information you can find on Rhodes Medical Technology's latest innovations." Back at the research facility, Autumn and Kingston had moved from the lab to the conference room, where they were presenting their findings to a virtual panel of international medical experts. The holographic displays showed brain scans from multiple angles as Autumn explained the breakthrough in their diagnostic algorithms. By incorporating machine learning with traditional diagnostic methods, she explained, her voice clear and confident, we've created a system that can identify potential issues weeks earlier than current methods. But more importantly, we've designed it to be accessible to facilities with limited resources. Kingston watched with pride as she commanded the attention of some of the world's leading medical minds. This was the woman Jace had tried to confine to charity galas and society functions, her brilliant mind relegated to background decoration for his social climbing. The thought made him angry, but that anger was overshadowed by gratitude that she had found her way to him, that they could build something meaningful together. The presentation concluded with unanimous enthusiasm from the panel. As the holographic displays faded, Kingston pulled Autumn into his arms. "You're going to change the world," he murmured against her hair. "We're going to change it together." Autumn melted into his embrace, the exhaustion of the all-nighter finally catching up with her. "I never thought I could have both," she admitted softly. "Love and purpose, passion and partnership. With Jace, everything was about appearances, about fitting into his world. But with you, with me, you don't have to choose," Kingston finished, understanding perfectly. "Your brilliance isn't something to be managed or contained. It's something to be unleashed." Their moment was interrupted by Kingston's assistant, bearing news that would reshape their plans even further. "The Gates Foundation called," she announced, barely containing her excitement. "They want to fund a global rollout of the diagnostic system. They're offering full support for implementation in developing nations." The news hit them both like a wave of possibility. This was what they had dreamed of, not just developing the technology, but making it accessible to those who needed it most. Kingston pulled up the preliminary proposal on his tablet, but Autumn was already moving back toward the lab. "We'll need to modify the interface," she called over her shoulder, her mind racing with improvements. "Make it more intuitive for facilities with minimal training resources. And the power requirements, we can optimize those for regions with unstable electricity." Kingston quickly caught up to her, matching her stride as they returned to the lab. This was their dance, ideas flowing between them, each building on the other's thoughts, their shared vision growing stronger with every exchange. It was so different from the careful choreography of her life with Jace, where every step had been measured and every word calculated. The day unfolded in a blur of productivity and passion. They moved seamlessly between coding sessions and strategy meetings, their energy feeding off each other. When Autumn's phone buzzed with messages from her lawyer about the divorce proceedings, she barely noticed. The past seemed increasingly irrelevant in the face of such a bright future. By late afternoon, news of their medical breakthrough had overshadowed the society page coverage of their engagement. CNBC ran a special segment on the implications of their AI diagnostic system for global healthcare. The stock price of Rhodes Medical Technologies soared, while Sterling Capital Management saw its shares decline as rumors spread about the Morrison deal's instability. In their lab, Autumn and Kingston remained oblivious to the financial markets drama. They were lost in their work, in the joy of creation and the satisfaction of knowing their efforts would save lives. When Autumn finally took a break to check her messages, she found one from Dr. Harrison, her protégé at the hospital. "The board wants to implement the AI system immediately," she read aloud. "They're calling it the future of diagnostic medicine." She looked up at Kingston, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "We're really doing this. We're really going to make a difference." Kingston crossed the lab to her side, his presence solid and reassuring. "This is just the beginning," he promised. "Together, we're going to rewrite the rules of what's possible in medicine." As evening approached, They finally allowed themselves to feel the exhaustion of their all-nighter. Kingston's private chef had delivered dinner to the lab, a thoughtful selection of healthy, energizing dishes that showed his attention to detail and understanding of Autumn's preferences. They ate at her workstation, surrounded by holographic displays of brain scans and algorithm flowcharts. It wasn't a romantic dinner by conventional standards, but for them, it was perfect. Their conversation flowed effortlessly between technical discussions and personal dreams, each realm enriching the other. "Move in with me," Kingston said suddenly, his voice soft but certain. "Not because of last night's proposal, not because of the divorce, but because we work better together, because every moment you're not here feels like a missed opportunity to change the world." Autumn looked around the lab, their lab, and felt the rightness of his words. This wasn't just a workplace. It was where their shared dreams took shape, where their combined brilliance could make the impossible possible. "Yes," she replied simply, "but we're keeping this as our date night spot." Kingston laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Only you would consider a medical research lab romantic," he teased, but his eyes held nothing but adoration and understanding. As night fell over Manhattan, their lab remained illuminated by the glow of holographic displays and the bright promise of their shared future. While the city buzzed with gossip about their engagement and speculation about Sterling Capital's future, they remained focused on what truly mattered, the work that would touch countless lives and the love that made it all possible. The contrast couldn't have been starker. In his increasingly empty office, Jace Sterling fought to save his empire, his decisions haunted by the ghost of what he had lost. But in their lab, Autumn and Kingston built something new, a partnership based on shared purpose, mutual respect, and the thrilling possibility of changing the world together. The night deepened, but they continued working, their energy sustained by passion and possibility. They were no longer just two brilliant individuals. They had become something more, a force for change, a catalyst for innovation, and proof that the greatest achievements come not from seeking power or status, but from finding someone who shares your dreams and multiplies your impact. As they finally prepared to leave the lab, Kingston caught Autumn in another embrace. "Thank you," he whispered against her temple. "For what?" she asked, looking up at him with curious eyes. "For choosing this, for choosing us, for being someone who understands that true love isn't about grand gestures or social status. It's about building something meaningful together." Autumn's response was to pull him back to the workstation, where a new idea had just occurred to her. They would sleep eventually, but for now they had a world to change, and they would do it together. Chapter 6. Drowning Sorrows. The polished mahogany of Jace Sterling's desk reflected the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler like a dark mirror, distorting the reality he was desperately trying to escape. It was barely noon, but the Macallan 25 had been calling his name since he'd arrived at the office 3 hours ago. Sterling Tower's 45th floor, once his personal kingdom, now felt like a luxurious prison where he watched his empire crumble in real time. CNBC played silently on the wall-mounted screen, the ticker showing Sterling Capital Management's stock in a steady decline. The Morrison deal hadn't just fallen through, it had imploded spectacularly, taking with it not just billions in potential revenue, but also the firm's reputation for stability. The headlines scrolling across the bottom of the screen felt like personal attacks. Sterling Capital struggles amid leadership concerns, and Rhodes Medical Technologies announces revolutionary AI diagnostic system. His intercom buzzed, his secretary's voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Morrison's office is on line 1. They're requesting immediate repayment of the initial investment, citing the moral turpitude clause in the contract." Jace stared at the blinking light on his phone, remembering how he'd laughed at the clause when their lawyers had drafted it. Who would have thought his personal life could torpedo a multi-billion-dollar deal? He reached for the tumbler instead of the phone, the single malt burning a familiar path down his throat. His phone vibrated with another text from Scarlett. She had been relentless since that night at Le Cirque, her messages evolving from desperate to angry to finally this morning resigned. "I've accepted an offer in Silicon Valley. Don't try to contact me." The irony wasn't lost on him. She was leaving him for exactly the industry that had claimed his wife. The Wall Street Journal lay open on his desk, the business section dominated by a photo of Autumn and Kingston at their press conference announcing the global implementation of their AI diagnostic system. She looked radiant, confident, her hand gesturing toward a holographic display as she explained their breakthrough. Kingston stood beside her, his attention focused entirely on her words, his pride evident in every line of his face. Jace's own face stared back at him from a smaller photo beside the article, an old shot from better days. The contrast was stark. In just weeks, he had aged years. His usual impeccable appearance had begun to slip, his designer suits hanging a little looser, his eyes carrying the haunted look of a man watching his life unravel. A knock on his door forced him to quickly slide the tumbler into his desk drawer. Bradley Walsh, his CFO and oldest friend on Wall Street, entered without waiting for a response. The look on his face told Jace everything he needed to know. "The board called an emergency meeting," Bradley said, his Chicago accent thicker with stress. 3 p.m. today. They're concerned about the firm's direction." Jace laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. "Concerned? They're planning to force me out, Brad. Let's not pretend otherwise." Bradley sank into one of the leather chairs facing the desk, looking every bit his 55 years. "It's not just the Morrison deal, Jace. The PR nightmare, the stock decline, the clients pulling their portfolios. We've lost 30% of our managed assets in 3 weeks. And gained one hell of a redemption story for my ex-wife," Jace muttered, giving up pretense and retrieving his scotch. He offered a glass to Bradley, who declined with a sad shake of his head. "Have you seen the latest?" Bradley asked, pulling up a news article on his tablet. "Rhodes Medical Technologies just received full FDA approval for their AI system. They're projecting it will save over 1 million lives in the first year alone. Autumn's being called the face of modern medicine's future." The tablet showed another photo, this one from a charity gala the previous week. Autumn and Kingston surrounded by medical luminaries and tech giants, accepting an award for humanitarian innovation. She wore a stunning emerald gown that made her dark skin glow, her smile radiant as she addressed the crowd. Kingston's arm rested naturally around her waist, their comfort with each other evident in every casual touch. "She was always brilliant," Jace admitted, the scotch finally loosening his tongue. I never thought she'd outmaneuver me like this. I thought I was the one playing chess while she was focused on her career." Bradley's expression softened with something like pity. "That was your mistake, Jace. She wasn't playing chess at all. She was building something real while you were playing games." The afternoon stretched on, each hour bringing new reports of declining stock values and client departures. Jace's phone buzzed constantly. Board members, investors, reporters, all demanding explanations he couldn't give. How could he explain that he had sabotaged his own life, that he had taken a brilliant, loving woman for granted and lost her to someone who could match her intellect and ambition? At 3 o'clock sharp, Jace stood before the board in the main conference room, his slightly rumpled appearance a sharp contrast to their pristine suits and stern expressions. The vote was quick, almost merciful in its speed. By 4, security was escorting him out of the building he had once ruled, a cardboard box, of personal items in his arms, like a cliché of corporate downfall. The city seemed different from street level. The towering buildings that had once represented his domain, now looming over him like judges. He found himself walking, ignoring the curious glances from people who recognized him from the news. His feet carried him unconsciously toward the hospital where Autumn worked. Used to work, he corrected himself. She had accepted a position as Chief of Innovation at Rhodes Medical's new research hospital. Through the hospital's glass entrance, he caught a glimpse of a news report playing in the lobby. Autumn was on screen again, demonstrating their AI system to a group of international healthcare officials. Her passion was evident even through the muted television, her hands moving animatedly as she explained complex medical concepts in a way that made them accessible. "She's amazing, isn't she?" a voice beside him said. He turned to find a young resident watching the same broadcast. "Dr. Winters, soon to be Doctor. Rhodes, she's revolutionizing everything. Did you know their system can detect brain tumors weeks earlier than traditional methods? She's saving lives even when she's not in surgery." Jace didn't respond, couldn't respond. He turned away from the hospital and headed toward the nearest bar, the weight of his choices hanging heavier with each step. The same bar from that first night welcomed him back, the bartender recognizing him with a knowing nod. "The usual?" she asked, already reaching for the Macallan. "Make it a double," he muttered, loosening his tie. The TV above the bar was showing business news, and he gestured for her to change it, but not before he caught the headline. "Rhodes Medical Technologies announces global initiative, sterling capital reports, record losses." His phone buzzed again, his lawyer this time, reminding him about the divorce settlement meeting tomorrow. Autumn had been more than fair in her demands, taking only what she had brought to the marriage and her share of their joint assets. She didn't want his money, she was too busy making her own history. The scotch arrived, and Jace stared into its depths as if seeking answers. How had he not seen it coming? The signs had been there, her late nights at the lab with Kingston, her growing passion for their joint project, the way she had stopped fighting about his absences and business dinners. She hadn't just been planning her exit, she had been building her future. The bar's other patrons gave him a wide berth, perhaps recognizing him from the news or simply sensing the dark cloud that surrounded him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos, charity galas, vacation photos, society events. In every picture, he realized now, Autumn's smile had been polite but distant, her eyes focused on something beyond the camera, beyond their carefully crafted life. A new notification popped up, another news alert about Rhodes Medical Technologies. They had just announced plans for a new research center in Baltimore, specifically focused on bringing cutting-edge medical technology to underserved communities. The location wasn't random. It was Autumn's hometown, where she had grown up watching her mother work double shifts as a nurse to make ends meet. "You know what your problem was?" the bartender said, sliding another scotch his way without being asked. "You thought you were the story, but you were just a chapter in hers." The truth of those words hit harder than any board meeting or stock report. Jace Sterling, who had prided himself on his ability to read markets and manipulate outcomes, had failed to see the most important trend of all, that the woman he had taken for granted had outgrown him long before she had left him. Night fell over Manhattan, the city lights blurring through the bar's windows like stars falling from grace. In his pocket, his phone continued to buzz with news alerts and messages he couldn't bear to read. Somewhere across town, in a state-of-the-art lab that represented everything he had failed to understand about his wife, Autumn was probably still working, still changing the world, still building a future that no longer included him. The scotch offered no answers, no comfort, no escape from the reality that he had orchestrated his own downfall. His affair with Scarlett hadn't just cost him his marriage, it had exposed the hollow core of his existence, the emptiness behind the perfect facade he had worked so hard to maintain. Last call came and went, but the bartender let him stay, perhaps recognizing that he had nowhere else to go. The cardboard box from his office sat accusingly at his feet, a pathetic collection of awards and achievements that seemed meaningless now. In the end, Jace Sterling, master of hostile takeovers and corporate strategy, had been outmaneuvered not by a competitor's cunning, but by his own wife's quiet dignity and unwavering purpose. Tomorrow would bring more challenges: the divorce settlement, the press inquiries, the slow dismantling of everything he had built. But tonight, in a bar he would have never deigned to enter in his previous life, Jace Sterling finally confronted the truth. He had never deserved autumn winters, and now the whole world knew it. Chapter 7. The Foundation. The Baltimore sun rose over a transformed landscape. Where once stood an abandoned warehouse district, now gleamed the ultra-modern campus of the Winters Roads Foundation, its solar panel facades catching the morning light like diamonds. Autumn stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main research building, her hand pressed against the glass as she took in the sight of her hometown's newest beacon of hope. "Remember when I told you I wanted to dream bigger?" Kingston's voice came from behind her as his arms wrapped around her waist. "I don't think even I imagined this." The Foundation's main building housed the most advanced medical research facilities in the world. But it was the surrounding complex that truly captured their vision. A state-of-the-art teaching hospital, a medical training center for underprivileged students, and a technology innovation hub, all designed to bring cutting-edge healthcare to communities that had been historically overlooked. "My mother would have loved this," Autumn said softly, thinking of the woman who had worked double shifts as a nurse to put her through medical school. She always said healthcare shouldn't be a privilege. Kingston pressed a kiss to her temple, understanding the weight of this moment. "She's why we chose Baltimore, isn't it? Not just because it's your hometown, but because it's where you first saw the disparities in healthcare access." Autumn turned in his arms, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I used to watch her come home exhausted from her shifts, telling stories about patients who couldn't afford basic treatments. When Jace mocked this city, called it beneath us." She shook her head, banishing old memories. "He never understood that this was always part of my plan. I just needed the right partner to make it happen." The morning light caught her engagement ring, but it was the ID badge clipped to her lab coat that made her smile. Dr. Autumn Winters, Chief Innovation Officer and co-founder. No more society galas where she was introduced as Jace Sterling's wife. Here she was exactly who she had always meant to be. Their moment was interrupted by Dr. Harrison, who had followed Autumn from New York Presbyterian to help establish the Foundation's research protocols. "The first group of scholarship students is here," he announced, his excitement palpable. 20 brilliant minds who would never have had the chance to attend medical school without the Foundation. Kingston squeezed Autumn's hand before releasing her. "Go," he said with a smile. "Show them what's possible when talent meets opportunity." The lecture hall was filled with young faces that reminded Autumn of herself at their age, hungry for knowledge, burning with potential, but constrained by circumstances beyond their control. As she took the podium, she caught sight of a familiar figure slipping into the back of the room. Her mother's old colleague, Nurse Jenkins, who had helped watch over her while her mother worked extra shifts. "Welcome to the Winters Roads Foundation," Autumn began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Each of you was chosen not just for your academic excellence, but for your understanding of why we're here. Medicine isn't just about treating symptoms, it's about transforming communities." She launched into her presentation, showcasing the Foundation's innovative approach to medical education. The traditional curriculum would be supplemented with hands-on experience in community health, advanced technology training, and real-world problem-solving. Each student would graduate not just with a medical degree, but with the skills to bring modern healthcare to underserved areas. In her office later that morning, Autumn reviewed the latest data from their AI diagnostic system's global implementation. The results were staggering. Early detection rates had improved by over 200% in rural clinics, and the cost-effective technology meant even the smallest facilities could offer advanced diagnostic services. A news alert popped up on her tablet. Sterling Capital Management Files for Chapter 11, Reorganization. She paused, letting the information sink in. There was no joy in seeing Jace's downfall, only a quiet acknowledgement that karma had its own timeline. Kingston found her there, lost in thought over the news. "I just saw," he said quietly. "Are you okay?" Autumn looked up at him, at the man who had helped her transform her dreams into reality. "I'm thinking about choices," she said. "About how some people build things, while others only know how to take them apart." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the glass walls of her office, they could see a group of local news crews gathering in the lobby. Word had gotten out about the Foundation's latest initiative, a program to identify promising medical talent in high schools across Baltimore's poorest neighborhoods. "They're calling it the future of medical education," Kingston said, pulling up the press coverage on his tablet. "But they're missing the bigger picture. This isn't just about training doctors, it's about changing the entire ecosystem of healthcare delivery." Autumn stood, straightening her lab coat. "Then let's go tell them the real story, about how every breakthrough we make here will be shared freely with hospitals worldwide. About how technology can bridge the gap between the world's best hospitals and the smallest rural clinics." As they made their way to the lobby, they passed the wall of donors in the main hallway. Prominent among them was a familiar name: "In memory of Grace Winters, Nurse, Mother, Inspiration." Autumn touched the plaque briefly, silently thanking the woman who had taught her that true success wasn't measured in dollars or social status, but in lives improved. The press conference was more than just an announcement. It was a declaration of principles. Kingston and Autumn stood together at the podium, their natural synchronicity evident as they took turns explaining their vision. They weren't just building a foundation, they were creating a blueprint for the future of global healthcare. "When we talk about medical innovation," Autumn explained to the gathered reporters, "we're not just talking about new technologies. We're talking about new ways of thinking about healthcare access. Every breakthrough we make here will be open source, available to any facility that needs it." Kingston stepped forward, adding, "The Winters Roads Foundation believes that zip code shouldn't determine healthcare quality. Our AI diagnostic system was just the beginning. Today, we're announcing a global initiative to bring advanced medical training and technology to 500 underserved communities worldwide." The questions flew fast and furious, but one caught Autumn's attention. A young reporter from the Baltimore Sun asked, "Dr. Winters, you could have built this anywhere. Why choose Baltimore?" Autumn smiled, thinking of her mother's worn nursing shoes by the door, of dinner-table conversations about patients who couldn't afford care, of a young girl doing homework by streetlight because the electricity had been cut off. "Because some debts can never be repaid, they can only be passed forward. Baltimore taught me that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Now it's teaching the world the same lesson." Later that evening, as the sun set over the Foundation's campus, Autumn and Kingston walked through the nearly completed hospital wing. The rooms were equipped with their AI diagnostic system, each one representing the potential to save countless lives. "You know what makes this different?" Kingston asked, watching Autumn run her hand along the state-of-the-art equipment they had designed together. "It's not just about the technology or the medicine. It's about dignity. Every person who walks through these doors will receive the same level of care, regardless of their ability to pay. Autumn leaned into him, their reflections ghostly in the window glass. Below, the lights of Baltimore twinkled. The city she had once been told to leave behind, now home to a revolution in medical care. "We're really doing this," she said softly. "We're really changing things." "We're just getting started," Kingston replied, pulling out his tablet to show her the latest proposals. The Gates Foundation wants to partner on expanding the program to Africa and Southeast Asia, and the WHO is interested in implementing our training protocols globally. As night fell over Baltimore, the Winters Roads Foundation stood as a beacon of hope, its lights promising a future where healthcare wasn't a luxury, but a fundamental right. Inside its walls, two people who had found each other through a shared vision continued to work, proving that the greatest revenge against those who doubted you isn't success alone, it's success that lifts others with you. The foundation wasn't just their legacy, it was proof that sometimes the best way to heal a broken heart is to help heal the world. And as Autumn and Kingston reviewed plans for their next initiative, their hands intertwined naturally, they knew that this was just the beginning of their story. Chapter 8. Redemption's Price. The cream-colored envelope arrived at Jace Sterling's temporary residence, a still luxurious but notably smaller Upper East Side apartment, on a Tuesday morning. The Winters Roads Foundation's embossed logo caught the light, a modern design that merged medical and technological symbols into something revolutionary, just like its founders. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, the heavy cardstock speaking of expense and importance. The Winters Roads Foundation cordially invites you to the inaugural gala celebrating the opening of our Baltimore Medical Innovation Center, the invitation read. His name was printed in elegant script, and below it, a handwritten note in Autumn's distinctive hand. "The past cannot be changed, but the future is still in our hands." Jace sank into his leather armchair, the invitation feeling heavier than its physical weight warranted. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan's skyline seemed different now, less like his kingdom and more like a reminder of everything he had lost. Sterling Tower, visible in the distance, no longer bore his name. The board's reorganization had been thorough and merciless. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Winters Roads Foundation revolutionizes medical education. First class of scholarship students begin training. The accompanying photo showed Autumn and Kingston standing before their stunning new Baltimore campus, their body language speaking of intimate partnership rather than staged poses. She wore a simple white lab coat over elegant professional attire, looking more radiant than she ever had at his carefully orchestrated society events. The invitation wasn't just to a gala, it was to witness Autumn's triumph. The Baltimore project had been her dream long before she met Kingston, one that Jace had dismissed as beneath their social station. "Why waste time on charity cases?" he remembered saying, the memory now burning like acid in his throat. "We have a position to maintain in New York society." His new apartment, though still luxurious by most standards, felt empty. The art collection they had built together had been divided in the divorce, with Autumn taking only the pieces she had personally selected, mostly works by emerging artists from underprivileged backgrounds. She had left him the blue-chip investments, the safe choices that now seemed as soulless as his former life. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. His new assistant, he could no longer afford the team he once maintained, entered with the morning's financial reports. Sterling Capital Management was slowly rebuilding under new leadership, but his personal wealth had taken a massive hit. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had enough to live comfortably for several lifetimes, yet he had never felt poorer. "Sir," his assistant said carefully, "the RSVP deadline for the Foundation Gala is tomorrow. Should I—" "I'll handle it," Jace cut him off, waving him away. Once alone, He pulled up recent news coverage of the foundation on his tablet. The Baltimore project was being hailed as a revolution in medical care and education. Every major news outlet had covered its development, from the state-of-the-art facilities to the groundbreaking scholarship program. One article particularly caught his attention: From Wall Street to Main Street, How the Winters Roads Foundation is Democratizing Healthcare. The piece detailed how Autumn and Kingston had taken his public downfall and turned it into motivation to help others rise. Their AI diagnostic system was now in thousands of clinics worldwide, saving lives in places Jace had never deigned to visit. His fingers hovered over his phone, tempted to call her for the first time since that night at Le Cirque. What would he say? That he was sorry. That he finally understood what she had been trying to tell him all those years. That watching her succeed without him had taught him more about himself than all his years on Wall Street. Instead, he picked up the invitation again, studying the details. The gala would honor the foundation's first achievements and announce its global expansion plans. Autumn would receive a humanitarian award, and Kingston would unveil their next technological breakthrough. The guest list would include not just New York society, but medical pioneers, tech innovators, and community leaders from around the world. The old Jace would have seen this as an opportunity to network, to rebuild his connections, and perhaps salvage some of his former influence. But as he sat in his quiet apartment, surrounded by the remnants of his previous life, he recognized this invitation for what it was: a chance for redemption, not in society's eyes, but in his own. He reached for his laptop, pulling up the Foundation's website. The mission statement caught his eye. Healthcare isn't a privilege, it's a fundamental right. Our goal is to ensure that quality medical care is accessible to everyone, regardless of their circumstances. The words echoed conversations he had dismissed, dreams he had belittled, passions he had failed to understand. The RSVP page waited for his response, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Accepting meant facing everyone who had witnessed his fall from grace. It meant watching Autumn shine in the life she had built without him, standing beside a man who had helped her dreams take flight instead of clipping her wings. "Mr. Sterling," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Dr. Harrison's office is on line 1. Something about your annual physical." The mention of his former wife's protégé brought another wave of memories. Dr. Harrison had followed Autumn to Baltimore, helping establish the Foundation's research protocols. He had chosen purpose over prestige, just as she had. Jace clicked accept on the RSVP page, adding a note: "I would be honored to witness the realization of a dream I was too blind to see." It wasn't enough. Nothing could be enough to make up for his past behavior, but it was a start. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his apartment as he began planning for the gala. His usual armor of expensive suits and carefully cultivated connections wouldn't serve him here. This would require something he had rarely shown in his previous life: genuine humility. He pulled up more coverage of the Foundation's work, forcing himself to read every article to understand exactly what Autumn and Kingston had built. The numbers were staggering. Thousands of lives saved through their AI diagnostic system, hundreds of promising students given the chance to become doctors, dozens of communities transformed through access to modern medical care. A message notification lit up his phone: Scarlett, reaching out from her new life in Silicon Valley. Saw the Foundation's latest press release. She's really done it, hasn't she? Built something real while we were playing games. He left it unanswered, the truth in her words requiring no response. As evening approached, Jace found himself drawn to the window, looking out at the city he had once thought he owned. From his reduced height, 40 floors lower than his previous office, the streets were more visible, the people more than just tiny specks moving below. He thought about Autumn's patience, about the lives she touched, about the legacy she was building while he had focused on accumulating wealth and power. The invitation sat on his desk, a bridge to a world he had never understood but now desperately wanted to comprehend. The gala wasn't just an event, it was a chance to see firsthand what happened when brilliant minds focused on improving lives rather than improving bottom lines. His phone buzzed again, this time with breaking news. Winters Roads Foundation announces revolutionary global health initiative. The accompanying video showed Autumn and Kingston at a press conference, their natural chemistry evident as they took turns explaining their vision for the future of healthcare. They weren't just partners, they were equals, each elevating the other's strengths. The sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of redemption. Jace Sterling, once master of mergers and acquisitions, faced his greatest challenge, attending a gala not as a power player, but as a humble witness to the triumph of the woman he had underestimated and the dreams he had dismissed. He made one final gesture before retiring for the evening, a substantial anonymous donation to the Foundation's scholarship fund. Not for recognition or influence, but because for the first time in his life, he understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in lives improved. The invitation caught the last rays of sunlight, the Foundation's logo shimmering with promise. In less than a month, Jace would face his past and glimpse a future he could have been part of, had he been wise enough to see it. The price of redemption was high, but as he was learning, some things were worth more than money could measure. Chapter 9. The Speech. The Baltimore Medical Innovation Center gleamed like a beacon against the night sky, its ultra-modern architecture illuminated by carefully positioned lights that made the building seem to float above the city. The grand ballroom, specially designed for this inaugural gala, hummed with the energy of over 500 guests, a carefully curated mix of medical pioneers, tech innovators, philanthropists and community leaders from around the world. Autumn stood in her private office overlooking the ballroom, taking a moment to collect herself before the evening's main event. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows showed a woman transformed, not just by the custom Valentino gown in deep emerald that highlighted her dark skin, or by the elegant arrangement of her dreadlocks interwoven with subtle golden threads, but by the quiet confidence that radiated from within. Kingston appeared behind her, his reflection joining hers in the glass. "The WHO representatives just arrived," he said softly, his hands resting on her shoulders. "They're already talking about implementing our training program across their global network." Autumn turned to face him, taking in how perfectly his tuxedo fit his athletic frame, the way his eyes held that mixture of pride and adoration that still made her heart skip. "Did you see him?" she asked, not needing to specify who she meant. "Back corner of the ballroom," Kingston confirmed, "as far from the podium as possible while still being in the room. He looks different." Different was an understatement. Through the glass walls of her office, Autumn could see Jace Sterling standing alone near one of the floor-to-ceiling windows. His expensive suit, while still perfectly tailored, seemed to hang slightly loose on his frame. The confident pose he had once maintained at every social event was gone, replaced by something more hesitant, more real. "Dr. Winters," her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "They're ready for you downstairs." Kingston squeezed her hand. "Ready to change the world again?" The ballroom fell silent as Autumn took the stage, the spotlight catching the elegant engagement ring on her finger. Not the ostentatious diamond Jace had given her, but a unique design that incorporated the double helix structure of DNA, symbolizing her commitment to both Kingston and their shared mission. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Look around you. What you see isn't just a building or an institution. What you see is a promise being kept. a promise to every person who has ever been told that quality healthcare was beyond their reach, a promise to every brilliant young mind that has ever been denied the opportunity to pursue their dreams of helping others. From his position at the back of the room, Jace watched transfixed as Autumn commanded the attention of some of the world's most influential people. This wasn't the politely smiling woman who had once stood beside him at countless charity galas. This was a force of nature, a leader sharing a vision that had already begun to transform lives. 1 year ago, Autumn continued, when we broke ground on this facility, many called our goals ambitious. Implementing advanced AI diagnostic systems in underserved clinics, training the next generation of medical innovators regardless of their ability to pay, creating a global network of accessible, cutting-edge healthcare. They said it couldn't be done. She paused, her eyes scanning the room before briefly meeting Jace's. But there was something they didn't understand. Dreams don't follow market projections. Passion doesn't bow to conventional wisdom. And the determination to make a difference, that's more powerful than any obstacle. Kingston watched from the side of the stage, his heart swelling with pride. The screens behind Autumn displayed real-time data from their global initiative. Lives saved, students educated, communities transformed. Each number represented a victory not just over illness, but over the systemic barriers they had vowed to break down. Tonight, we celebrate more than the opening of a building. We celebrate the beginning of a new era in global healthcare. Our AI diagnostic system is now operating in over 3,000 clinics worldwide. Our scholarship program has given hundreds of brilliant students the chance to become the doctors their communities desperately need, and this is just the beginning. The room erupted in applause as she gestured to the screens, which now showed their next phase of expansion. Satellite facilities in Africa, Asia, and South America, each designed to bring cutting-edge medical care to historically underserved regions. But before I announce our next initiative, Autumn's voice softened slightly, becoming more personal. I want to talk about lessons learned, about how sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its cruelest betrayals. In the back of the room, Jace felt the weight of hundreds of eyes turning briefly toward him. His hand tightened around his glass of sparkling water. He hadn't touched alcohol since that night at the bar. To the man who taught me that lesson, Autumn continued, her gaze finding Jace's again, thank you. Thank you for showing me what I never wanted to be and pushing me toward what I was meant to become. Your dismissal of these dreams as beneath us showed me exactly who I needed to be. Not for society, not for status, but for every person who deserves access to quality health care. Kingston moved to stand closer to the stage, his presence a silent support as Autumn delivered the most personal part of her speech. Their eyes met briefly, a world of understanding passing between them. But most importantly, she continued, her voice growing stronger, thank you to the man who showed me what true partnership looks like. Kingston, ... Her voice caught slightly as she turned to him. You didn't just believe in my dreams, you made them bigger. You showed me that innovation without purpose is empty, that success without impact is meaningless, and that love without respect is not love at all. The screens behind her shifted to show images of their work together. Late nights in the lab, breakthrough moments, celebrations with their team, and the faces of countless people whose lives they had touched. The Winters Roads Foundation stands as proof that the greatest achievements come not from seeking power or status, but from finding someone who shares your vision of a better world. Someone who understands that true success isn't measured in dollars or social standing, but in lives improved and barriers broken. She gestured to the scholarship student seated in a place of honor near the front. Look at these faces. These brilliant minds represent our future. They come from communities that have been historically denied access to medical education. They carry with them not just dreams of becoming doctors, but the understanding of why healthcare must be accessible to all. The room sat spellbound as Autumn outlined their next phase, a revolutionary approach to medical education that would combine traditional training with advanced technology and community-based learning. The WHO representatives nodded approvingly as she detailed plans for global implementation. "We stand at a crossroads in medical history," she declared, her voice rising with passion. "The technology exists to save countless lives. The talent exists in every community to provide care. The only question is, will we be brave enough to break down the barriers that have kept these resources from reaching those who need them most?" The screens behind her showed a live feed of their AI system in action. Rural clinics in Africa diagnosing conditions that would have once required expensive trips to distant cities. Students from underprivileged backgrounds performing virtual surgeries in advanced simulation labs. Communities being transformed through access to modern medical care. "This is not charity," Autumn emphasized, her voice firm. "This is justice. This is what happens when we stop seeing healthcare as a privilege and start treating it as the fundamental human right it should be." As she concluded her speech, the room erupted in a standing ovation. Kingston joined her on stage, their natural chemistry evident as they stood together, ready to answer questions about their vision for the future. From his position at the back of the room, Jace watched as various dignitaries and industry leaders crowded around them, eager to be part of what they were building. He saw in Autumn's smile not just success but fulfillment, something she had never achieved in their carefully curated society life. The evening continued with demonstrations of their latest medical innovations, tours of the facility, and announcements of new partnerships. But for those who had witnessed it, Autumn's speech remained the most powerful moment, a declaration not just of professional success, but of personal triumph over adversity. As the gala proceeded into dinner and dancing, Autumn and Kingston moved through the crowd with natural grace, their conversations focusing not on social niceties, but on real impact and future possibilities. They had created something larger than themselves, a legacy that would continue to grow and transform lives long after this evening was over. The Baltimore city lights twinkled beyond the windows, a fitting backdrop to an evening that marked not just the opening of a building, but the beginning of a revolution in global healthcare. And in the midst of it all, Autumn Winters stood as a beacon of what was possible when one refused to let others define their worth or limit their dreams. Chapter 10. Mirror Images. The gala's after-party transformed the Baltimore Medical Innovation Center's grand atrium into a glittering testament to success, with champagne flowing freely and the world's elite mingling beneath spectacular holographic displays of the Foundation's achievements. As Kingston led Autumn onto the dance floor, her emerald gown catching the light with every graceful movement, Jace Sterling watched from his position at the bar, nursing a glass of sparkling water that felt like a poor substitute for his former liquid courage. The contrast between past and present had never been more stark. A year ago, he would have been at the center of such an event, commanding attention with his mere presence. Now he occupied the margins, watching as his ex-wife and her new fiancé became the axis around which the room revolved. "They're quite something, aren't they?" The familiar voice beside him belonged to Bradley Walsh, his former chief financial officer. The older man had managed to land on his feet after Sterling Capital's reorganization, securing a position on the Foundation's financial advisory board. "I've never seen two people more perfectly matched," Jace couldn't argue. Kingston and Autumn moved together with an effortless synchronicity that went beyond mere dancing. Every gesture, every shared glance spoke of a deep understanding that he and Autumn had never achieved. Even now, as they paused to speak with WHO officials, their body language revealed a partnership of equals rather than a carefully maintained social facade. The Morrison Group just signed on as major donors, Bradley continued, his tone carefully neutral. Funny how things work out, isn't it? The deal that broke Sterling Capital is now funding the Foundation's next phase of expansion. The irony wasn't lost on Jace. He watched as Autumn explained something to the gathered dignitaries, her hands moving animatedly as she described their latest technological breakthrough. Kingston stood beside her, not attempting to dominate the conversation, but adding key points that elevated her presentation. They were a power couple in the truest sense, each making the other stronger. The holographic displays above the dance floor shifted to show their AI system in action, real-time data from clinics around the world where their technology was saving lives. Each glowing point on the global map represented a victory, a life touched, a community transformed. It was the kind of legacy Jace had never thought to build, too focused on accumulating wealth rather than creating lasting change. Mr. Sterling. A young voice drew his attention. One of the scholarship students stood before him, her name tag identifying her as Jasmine Williams, first-year medical student. I heard what you did, the anonymous donation to the scholarship fund. It's helping people like me have a chance we never thought possible. Jace felt heat rise to his face, uncomfortable with gratitude he didn't deserve. His donation had been substantial, but ultimately a drop in the ocean compared to what Autumn and Kingston had built. The Foundation deserves the credit, he managed, his voice rougher than intended. They're the ones making real change. Across the room, Autumn caught sight of this exchange, her expression unreadable. Kingston followed her gaze, then whispered something in her ear that made her smile and nod. They made their way through the crowd toward the bar, their progress slowed by well-wishers and admirers. "Jasmine," Autumn called warmly as they approached. "I see you've met Mr. Sterling. She's one of our most promising students," she added, her tone professional but not unkind, top of her class in our advanced diagnostic training program. Kingston stepped forward, his hand resting naturally at the small of Autumn's back. Jasmine just published her first research paper on improving our AI's pattern recognition for pediatric cases. It's being implemented in the next system update. The young woman beamed at the praise, then excused herself to rejoin her fellow students. Jace found himself alone with the couple he had spent months avoiding in the society pages. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Your speech," Jace finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. It was, illuminating. Autumn's expression softened slightly. "Truth often is." She glanced around the atrium at the fruits of her labor surrounding them. "You know, you once told me I was wasting my potential focusing on community health initiatives, that I should be thinking bigger." "I was wrong," Jace admitted, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "About so many things." Kingston watched this exchange with quiet intensity, his arms still protectively around Autumn's waist. Not possessive, Jace noted, but supportive, a subtle difference he was only now beginning to understand. "The Foundation is accepting proposals for new satellite facilities," Kingston said, his deep voice carrying no trace of smugness. "Your experience in financial structuring could be valuable if you're interested in doing something meaningful with your expertise." The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected and complex in its implications. Before Jace could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Reporters had gathered around a new arrival, Scarlet Rivers, looking elegant, but somehow diminished in a designer dress that seemed more armor than clothing. "I didn't invite her," Autumn said quickly, noting Jace's panicked expression. "I did," Kingston admitted. She's representing her Silicon Valley firm. They're interested in partnering on our medical technology patents." He turned to Jace, his expression serious. "The past doesn't have to define the future. We're building something bigger than personal history here." Jace watched as Scarlett was immediately surrounded by tech industry executives, her former identity as his mistress overshadowed by her current position as a rising star in medical technology investment. She caught his eye briefly, nodded once in acknowledgement, then turned her full attention to a discussion about automated diagnostic systems. "She found her way," Autumn observed. "We all did, eventually." She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, the ring on her finger catching the light. Not just her engagement ring, Jace noticed, but the key card to the research lab hanging on an elegant chain around her neck, symbols of both personal and professional commitment. The holographic displays shifted again, showing the Foundation's plans for the next 5 years, expansion into 30 more countries, training programs for thousands of medical professionals, research facilities that would push the boundaries of what was possible in modern medicine. "Your mother would be proud," Jace said softly, remembering the nurse who had worked double shifts to put Autumn through medical school. "I should have seen it sooner. This was always who you were meant to be." Autumn's expression remained neutral, but her eyes softened slightly. "Sometimes we need to lose our way to find our true path." She glanced at Kingston, their shared look speaking volumes. "Sometimes what seems like an ending is really a beginning." The evening continued around them, a celebration not just of the Foundation's success, but of transformation itself. Jace watched as Autumn and Kingston returned to their guests, their natural chemistry drawing people into their orbit. They stopped to speak with each group of donors and dignitaries, but their real animation came when discussing projects with medical students and community health workers. From his quiet corner, Jace observed the room like a man watching a play he had once starred in, but now viewed from the audience. The whispers around him were a mix of professional admiration for the Foundation and barely concealed commentary on his own fall from grace. His firm was being absorbed by Kingston's investment division, his social standing had plummeted, and his former wife was revolutionizing global healthcare with another man. Yet somehow, watching Autumn in her element, surrounded by the reality of her dreams, Jace felt something unexpected. Not jealousy or resentment, but a dawning understanding. She had never needed his permission or approval to be extraordinary. She had simply needed the freedom to be herself and a partner who could match her vision. As the night drew to a close, Autumn and Kingston took one last turn around the dance floor. The holographic stars above them seemed to dance with them, each point of light representing a life their work would touch. They moved together with the ease of two people who had found not just love, but purpose in each other. Jace finished his sparkling water and prepared to leave, his role in this story finally clear. He was neither villain nor victim, but a catalyst, the unwitting agent of change that had pushed Autumn toward her true destiny. As he walked toward the exit, he passed the wall of donors, his anonymous contribution listed among hundreds of others. It wasn't redemption, not really, but perhaps it was a start. The Baltimore night welcomed him with a cool embrace, the Foundation's gleaming towers rising behind him like a monument to what was possible when dreams were given room to grow. In the reflection of his car's window, he caught one last glimpse of the atrium. Autumn and Kingston standing together, their silhouettes merging with the holographic display of their global impact, a perfect image of two people who had found both love and purpose in changing the world. Chapter 11. The Letter. The morning after the gala, Autumn sat in her office at the Baltimore Medical Innovation Center, the city skyline painted in soft dawn colors beyond her windows. A heavyweight cream envelope sat before her on the desk, her name written in Jace's distinctive handwriting, Kingston had found it waiting when they arrived, placed carefully against her office door. She ran her fingers over the expensive stationery, remembering how Jace had always insisted on the finest things. Even in apparent humility, old habits lingered. The seal bore the Sterling family crest, another touch of the man she had once known, unable to completely let go of symbols of status. Kingston entered quietly, 2 cups of their favorite artisanal coffee in hand. He set one beside her without comment, understanding that this moment needed space. He took his usual seat in the comfortable chair near her desk, close enough to offer support, but far enough to give her privacy. With steady hands, Autumn opened the envelope and began to read. Dear Autumn, there are moments in life when we face our truths in mirrors we never wished to look into. Last night was mine. Watching you command that room, not with the social graces I once demanded, but with genuine brilliance and purpose, I finally understood the magnitude of what I had lost. Or rather, what I had never truly possessed. You deserve to know that my presence at the gala wasn't an attempt to reclaim what was lost or to disrupt what you've built. It was a pilgrimage of sorts, a necessary witnessing of the woman you always were beneath the society wife I tried to shape you into. You said in your speech that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its cruelest betrayals. My betrayal was cruel, unforgivable, in its casual disregard for your worth. But watching you with Kingston, seeing the empire of compassion and innovation you've built together, I realized that perhaps my greatest contribution to your life was failing you so completely that you found your true path. He is what I should have been, a partner who amplifies your light rather than trying to contain it within the narrow confines of social expectations. When you speak together about medical innovations and global impact, you shine with a brilliance that makes my world of hedge funds and hostile takeovers seem small and hollow. You were always meant for more than being Jace Sterling's wife. I see that now. The way Kingston looks at you, not as an accessory to his success, but as an equal partner in creating something meaningful, shows me everything I failed to be. The Foundation's work is extraordinary. Your AI diagnostic system is revolutionizing healthcare in places I once dismissed as irrelevant to our social standing. The scholarship program is giving opportunities to brilliant minds I would have overlooked. You're not just changing lives, you're transforming the very landscape of global healthcare. Last night, I watched you dance with Kingston beneath those holographic displays of your worldwide impact. Each point of light represented a life touched by your vision, a dream realized despite my attempts to diminish it. The young student who thanked me for my anonymous donation showed me what real impact looks like, not in dollars accumulated, but in potential unleashed. I was a boy playing at being worthy of you. Kingston is the man I should have been, and watching you together is my penance. He understands what I never did, that true partnership isn't about ownership or control, but about nurturing each other's dreams and amplifying each other's impact. Seeing Scarlett, there was another mirror I needed to face. She's found her own path in the tech world, proving that we were all capable of growth once freed from the toxic patterns I created. Her success, like yours, came from escaping my influence rather than being defined by it. The offer to contribute to the Foundation's expansion is more generous than I deserve. If you and Kingston are serious about it, I would be honored to help. Not to reclaim any part of the past, but to finally be part of something meaningful, to use whatever skills I have to support the vision I once foolishly dismissed. Your mother once told me that real success isn't measured in assets, but in lives improved. I dismissed her wisdom as naive then, too blinded by my own ambition to see the truth. The foundation you've built with Kingston is her legacy as much as yours, a testament to the values she instilled in you, values I failed to appreciate until it was too late. The young doctors you're training, the lives you're saving, the communities you're transforming. This is real power, real success. Not the hollow victories I chased on Wall Street, but lasting change that will ripple through generations. I won't ask for forgiveness. Some bridges, once burned, should remain ash. But I want you to know that I finally understand. Your brilliance wasn't something to be managed or contained. It was something to be unleashed upon the world. Kingston saw that from the beginning, and together you've created something far greater than anything I could have imagined. You were right to leave, right to find someone who could match your vision and amplify your impact, right to build something that will outlast all of us. The foundation isn't just a building or an organization. It's proof that sometimes we must lose everything we thought we wanted to find what we were meant to create. Thank you for showing me what real success looks like. Thank you for proving that the greatest revenge isn't destruction, but creation. And most of all, thank you for becoming exactly who you were always meant to be, despite my best efforts to make you something less. With respect and admiration, Jace. Autumn set the letter down, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper as she processed its contents. Kingston remained quietly supportive, his presence anchoring her in the moment. He finally understands, she said softly, looking up to meet Kingston's warm gaze. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we need most, Kingston replied, moving to stand behind her chair. His hands rested gently on her shoulders, offering silent support. Through her office windows, the Baltimore sunrise painted the sky in shades of promise. Below, medical students were already arriving for early morning classes, each one carrying dreams that the foundation would help make reality. Should we accept his offer to help with the expansion? Kingston asked, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer. Autumn smiled, reaching up to cover his hand with hers. Everyone deserves the chance to be part of something meaningful, she said, even those who once tried to prevent it. The letter sat between them, a bridge between past and future, proof that sometimes the greatest transformations come not from holding on to anger, but from allowing everyone the chance to grow into better versions of themselves. Outside, the Foundation's AI system continued its work, saving lives across the globe. Inside, two people who had found both love and purpose stood together, ready to expand their vision of accessible healthcare to even more communities in need. And somewhere in Manhattan, a man who had finally learned the true meaning of success, prepared to use his skills for something greater than personal gain. The morning light caught Autumn's engagement ring and the keycard around her neck, symbols of a partnership that had transformed not just their lives, but countless others. The foundation they had built together stood as testament to what was possible when brilliance was matched with purpose, when love was paired with respect, and when personal success was measured not in wealth accumulated, but in lives improved. Final chapter. Full circle. 1 year after the Foundation's inaugural gala, Le Cirque's elegant interior once again played host to a pivotal moment in Autumn and Kingston's journey. The same table where he had proposed now held a different kind of celebration. The successful implementation of their AI diagnostic system in 5,000 clinics worldwide, and more importantly, their wedding the following week. The restaurant's soft lighting caught the subtle patterns in Autumn's burgundy dress as she gazed out at the Manhattan skyline. She wasn't the same woman who had sat in this restaurant a year ago, receiving a life-changing proposal. She was stronger, more fulfilled, her success measured not in social status, but in lives transformed. Kingston reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Do you remember what you said when we first discussed expanding the AI program globally?" His dark eyes held the same mixture of admiration and partnership that had drawn her to him from the beginning. "That every dream needs both wings and roots," Autumn replied, smiling at the memory. "The wings to reach far, but the roots to remember why we started." Their conversation was interrupted by the maitre d', who approached with a bottle of champagne. "Compliments of Mr. Sterling," he said, presenting a small card with the bottle. The card read simply, "To Roots and Wings. May your union continue to transform lives. J." Autumn accepted the gesture with grace, understanding its significance. In the past year, Jace had proven himself a valuable advisor to the Foundation's expansion efforts, using his financial expertise not for personal gain, but to help extend their reach to more communities in need. He had found his own path to redemption through purpose. "You know," Kingston said thoughtfully, "sometimes I think the greatest love stories aren't just about romance. They're about finding someone who shares your vision of making the world better." Autumn squeezed his hand, thinking of their journey. Their love hadn't begun with grand gestures or passionate declarations. It had grown in quiet moments of shared purpose, in late nights solving medical challenges, in the joy of seeing their work change lives. Through the restaurant's windows, they could see Sterling Tower in the distance, now headquarters for a different kind of financial empire, one focused on funding medical innovations and healthcare accessibility worldwide. Jace had transformed his remaining assets into a force for positive change, proving that it's never too late to choose a better path. "Did you see today's impact report?" Autumn asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "The early detection rates in rural clinics have improved by 300%. Children who would have been diagnosed too late now have a fighting chance." Kingston nodded, pulling up the latest data on his tablet. "And the first class of scholarship students graduates next month. 87 brilliant doctors ready to serve communities that have never had adequate medical care." Their success hadn't just been professional. They had shown the world that true power comes not from controlling others, but from empowering them. Their partnership had become a template for modern leadership, proving that couples could build empires of impact rather than just wealth. As they enjoyed their dinner, other patrons tried to steal subtle glances at them. But unlike the social status-seeking stares of the past, these looks held admiration for what they represented, the possibility that success and purpose could walk hand in hand. "Next week," Kingston said softly, "when we exchange vows, we're not just promising each other forever. We're promising to keep building something larger than ourselves." Autumn's eyes misted slightly as she thought about their upcoming wedding. It would be held at the Foundation's Baltimore campus, surrounded not by society's elite, but by the students, patients, and healthcare workers whose lives they had touched. Her mother's memory would be honored not through expensive displays, but through a new wing dedicated to nursing education. "You know what the greatest lesson in all of this has been?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. "That sometimes the things that seem to break us actually break us open, allowing us to become who we were always meant to be." Kingston raised his glass in a toast. "To us, and to the beautiful truth that sometimes the wrong person leads you to the right one." As they clinked glasses, the Manhattan skyline twinkled behind them like stars bearing witness to a different kind of love story. One where personal happiness and global impact danced together in perfect harmony. The evening drew to a close, but their story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. They had proved that revenge doesn't have to mean destroying your enemy. It can mean building yourself into something they could never have imagined. That success isn't about accumulating wealth or power, but about creating lasting positive change in the world. As they prepared to leave, Autumn took one last look around Le Cirque. This restaurant had witnessed her lowest moment of betrayal and her highest moment of triumph. It stood as testament to the truth that life's greatest chapters often begin where we think the story has ended. Kingston helped her with her coat, his touch still sending the same thrills of partnership and possibility it had from the beginning. Together, they had built something extraordinary, a foundation that would continue changing lives long after they were gone, a love that made them both better people, and a legacy that proved success and compassion could walk hand in hand. They stepped out into the Manhattan night, not as another power couple, but as partners in the truest sense, two people who had found in each other not just love, but purpose. Their story served as a reminder that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its deepest wounds, that true love isn't about possession, but partnership, and that the most powerful thing we can do is become exactly who we were meant to be. The city stretched out before them, full of endless possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to expand their impact, new lives to touch. But tonight, in this moment, they were simply two people who had discovered that the greatest love stories aren't just about finding your other half. They're about finding someone who inspires you to become your best whole self. As their car pulled away from Le Cirque, the restaurant's lights dimming behind them, they carried with them the knowledge that true success isn't measured in dollars or social status, but in lives improved and dreams fulfilled. Their love story wasn't just about them. It was about every life they touched, every student they educated, every patient they helped save.